Happy offseason, everyone. Yes, the matches are done, but that does not mean that my work is finished. Certainly, it has actually just begun. We've got a top 5 today, and I feel like I could have made a top 10 out of the amount of news that always seem to trickle out in the few days after the fact. The players may be on vacation, but there is so much transfer buzz, and even things in the season that we didn't have time to talk about need to be wrapped up today. So welcome to episode 693 of the Barcelona podcast, presented by the Blue Wire Podcast Network. I am Dan Hilton, and with everything going on, again, with this top 5 just being 5 instead of 10 or 15, I didn't get to even talk about all the other transfer news that's going on around the world, including Marcus Rashford. So that's what Friday's, not watch along, but Friday's transfer talk banter on bigup.com/the Barcelona pod. That's what I got going on there. So that's on Friday. So please join me. If there's a name that you want me to talk about, or some player that you think is going under the radar, or maybe you got a big opinion about a player you think Barcelona should bring in, please join me for that one on Friday. So you can join as a member for free on Big Up to make sure you don't miss that, as well as subscribing on the YouTube channel, on the podcast apps, or help me out on Patreon for as low as $3. That's how you get involved. That's how you keep making all these shows all summer long. So without further ado, let's dive in. Here's the top 5 news of the week. Our first piece of news is Joan Garcia to Barcelona, ? Where there's smoke, there is fire. And at this point, for the player that played for the Catalonia national team against Costa Rica, he was already at the Estadi Johan Cruyff today. But no, that would not mean he's coming to Barcelona just yet. But Joan Garcia, the goalkeeper from Espanyol, where it said there's smoke, there's fire. And the fact that an Espanyol player hasn't really said no, he's kept everything ambiguous in the news and with the tabloids. So because the answer is not yet no, and we know behind the scenes, his agents seem to be cool with Barcelona. Barcelona seem to have him be their first priority. So you could hear a bunch about the Joan Garcia in the coming days. They say that there should be some kind of resolution to that from Friday or Monday of this week. So by the time we get to our transfer show on Big Up, we might have a better idea on whether or not there's a new goalkeeper coming in to Barcelona. The other option, though, more cynically, is that his agents and his camp are using the Barcelona interest to inflate his price tag, which at the moment is just a 25 million euro release clause in his contract, which would have actually gone lower if Espanyol had been relegated, but they are not. Instead, they're going to be by the skin of their teeth sticking up, but he will likely not be with them because he can be playing Champions League football in some way next season. There is interest from the Premier League, and again, at that low price, you get a goalkeeper for less than 30 million euros who, to my money, is one of the best in the world, or at least upcoming to that point. Yeah, you obviously go out and you do that if you're a team in the Prem. So Joan Garcia will likely be on the move in the coming week. To where, though? That's the big question. For one of the names I keep mentioning, we can put those transfer rumors to bed in Lucas Cavaliere of Lille. The tall goalkeeper from France will likely not be coming to Barcelona because the Lille goalkeeper's camp has said that Barcelona made contact, but having just made contact now, he'll likely be heading elsewhere, and there'll be another one on the move, like it is some other big side in the Champions League. Barcelona have also asked to know the conditions for a potential deal of Bart Verbruggen of Brighton. Good goalkeeper. Again, not necessarily the youngest, also not the oldest. You honestly generally want goalkeepers with some experience, and he would certainly fit that bill. I just don't know if he's better than Ter Stegen. Well, actually, let's do the Ter Stegen stuff now, because I have said nothing about Ter Stegen out. I think coming back from that kind of injury, you got to give him a little bit of time, but it's almost revisionist history because the club has only won one Champions League with him as the main goalkeeper. There seems to be a lot of pinning all of those failures on him. So I'm never going to try to push a player out unless they truly do something nefarious off the field. But Ter Stegen has always been a good servant of the club. He's a captain of the club. Again, he's integrated himself, speaking Catalan, raising his family, all those different things. So yes, he's also made a lot of money. It's a professional game. It's a business. I'm not saying push him out, but I am saying that if he's not good enough to be the Champions League, the Liga, everything, and force Szczesny back in a backup role, then with what Ter Stegen's going to be making in the coming seasons, Ter Stegen certainly should be looking at the door. But that's for the club to push him out, not necessarily, I think, for the fans. I think he's been a good enough servant for the club that kind of just give him a little bit more patience to come back if he can. But I also expect in the comment section on YouTube or on social media, me to get a lot of hate. I'm not defending Ter Stegen. I'm just saying you can do a lot worse in world football than Ter Stegen. But as I'm going to be talking about on Friday in that transfer talk, as well as what I've said in the past, I do not think that Ter Stegen and the goalkeeper he is at his best is actually the goalkeeper for the system that Hansi Flick plays. So instead of thinking Ter Stegen is just not good enough or a bad goalkeeper, no, I actually think the best of him isn't going to come under Hansi Flick, and you actually need a different profile of a goalkeeper. That does seem like a cop-out as to why I don't think Ter Stegen is the goalkeeper in the long run for Barcelona under Hansi Flick, but to me, it's more the X's and O's than it is even about Ter Stegen just being a bum of a goalkeeper, because I think that's certainly not the case. To me, he's a top 75 player for Barcelona. Sorry, he's made a lot of appearances, and he's done a lot in his career. So don't just try very much like I see a lot of people having done with Busquets and Piqué and Jordi Alba and Luis Suarez. He may not be seen as the same caliber of legend as the other ones I just named, but yeah, make sure you take a player who's been at the club for a while, and if he is being pushed out, let the club do that instead of trying to shove him out and revise the history that was a pretty good career at Barcelona. Speaking of good careers at Barcelona, Szczesny, it seems like his career is going to continue. It's hard to have asked for one better of a few months, but he's accepted Barca's renewal offer for next season. But will that be as a backup to a new guy coming in, or will that just be mixing time again with Ter Stegen? What we do know about Ter Stegen, though, he does want to play at the World Cup next summer as Germany's starter, and he has a contract till 2028. So truthfully, that might be what pushes Ter Stegen out of FC Barcelona, and then Szczesny just plays the backup to a Joan Garcia. I think that might be best case scenario. So Ter Stegen, to put it on the player to decide between money or being a starter at the World Cup next summer, let the player decide that. I think that's probably the club's best course of action. Our second piece of news is Ansu Fati to Monaco. It's not yet done, and things have gone quiet in the last 36 hours or so, but I think that's because this is pretty much already done and dusted. It's been reported on by everybody in the know that it will be a loan, not with an obligation to buy, but with a purchase option, which again means that Monaco will likely be paying most of his wages, I think, this season. There is an agreement in principle, yes, but with a buy option at the end of the season for Barcelona, it's like if he does well, then they'll buy him, and if he doesn't, then he still is not a useful player to return to Barcelona. I said it last summer. It felt like Ansu Fati's time at the club was done. It felt like that 2 years ago when he went on loan to Brighton, but still he continues on in an FC Barcelona uniform. And it has something to do with the amount of money he makes, more than 13 mil, which puts him in at least the top third in the wage bill, depending on how the renewals for Gavi and Araujo and Lamine Yamal shake out when we see those official numbers. But it does seem like Ansu Fati did still have options. Other teams are still willing to, very much like me, say that there is something there. We just have to recapture some confidence, and we have to recapture some of what he was with his ball striking ability. Maybe not all the other physical things with speed, but his ball striking ability. And Chelsea were reportedly wanting him. Other Prem League clubs were looking for him. But Monaco, it seems like, has actually won the, race. Not necessarily this musical chairs where nobody wants him. No, but the race assigned Ansu Fati seems to have gone to Monaco. So as always with Ansu, I just hope that he can get back to some part of his best, even if it's not at FC Barcelona. Our third piece of news probably should have actually been our first piece of news, +1, +1, +1, because the biggest news for the future for Barcelona is that Lamine Yamal's renewal is now done. He will be a player at FC Barcelona till 2031. It is a new 6-year deal, which makes him, my math's not the greatest, but 26 when he finishes this deal. I can also see them every 3 years or so also renegotiating this. But the way this deal seems to be shaking out is that it's very performance and achievement plus bonus based, which could make him the highest paid player in the squad, which actually totally makes sense for a forward of his caliber. So with a clause also inserted, if he wins the Ballon d'Or, all those different things, very much like Messi. And this is kind of a deal they're building, I think, with the ideas behind Messi, but they might have learned a little bit of lesson. Instead of having a high base salary, if you give him all these performance incentives, that means that the player that you think he's going to be, he will then make you the revenue up. And Messi kind of did this to large degrees as well. He is such a player that he will become so popular. And all of that buzz, all that news, the fact that he is turning kids, he is turning adults, he is turning people into fans of FC Barcelona just because of his excellence and, again, global marketing, all those different things. Lamine Yamal, through all the off-field things, could potentially make good on all those performance and achievements and those different incentives that are going to be in that contract. So that's a great way to shape his contract, in all honesty. We'll see what his base number is. Because you could keep going superlative in the records that he's broken, all these different things. I think the one that I haven't mentioned is that with the season finally over in the Liga, he finishes the top assist getter in the Liga with 13 assists. It's also the most for any teenager in the Liga in a single season in the 21st century. that feels like number 25 or 30 on the list of achievements he's had even this season. Yeah, Lamine Yamal, very, very good. And Barcelona knew they were going to have to pay for him. But yeah, for a player that should finish top 3 in the Ballon d'Or, if not actually winning it, I don't think they're going to give the Ballon d'Or to somebody so young. But as a player who should be finishing the top 3 for Ballon d'Or, voting at 17, certainly this year at least, Barcelona got him on one of the greatest single deals in football because he had yet to sign this contract during this last season. Our fourth piece of news is actually some pretty bad news, and number 5 is also some pretty bad news. But for 4, we're talking about Barça Atlétic, who are now relegated from the 3rd division of Spanish football to the 4th division. It was awful news on the day, too, for Sergi Mila and Barça Atlétic. Despite winning their game with a goal in the 89th minute on the final match day, Osasuna Bay equalized in the 95th minute of their game. That, again, was what sent Barça Atlétic down. And they had this push to try to fight for their safety near the end of this season, the last 2-3 months. But prior to that, there was that string, especially when Tony Fernandez was out, when they just could not score enough goals. They couldn't seem to solidify things defensively. They had guys in and out of the lineups, not just because of first-team call-ups, but they just could not have that consistency. So they were heading down to the 4th division, which, when it comes to this version of Barça Atlétic, I'm not too bad in a shape about it. I had mentioned that this is one of the youngest teams, maybe the actual youngest average age of a Barça Atlétic or Barça B squad in history. So I'm not that bad in a shape that a group of largely teenagers, or at least the high potential teenagers or the players you'd want to see in the first team, were all not just 19, 18, but like 16, 17 years old in the 3rd division of Spanish football, getting their professional reps in. And that's not a bad thing for Barça Atlétic at all. So the 4th division to the 3rd division, it's not that much of a jump in terms of quality. And putting Juliano Belletti next season in charge of Barça Atlétic, asking them for promotion, that's not the worst thing either. Deco, Boyan Kirkic, and Jose Romeo Alexanco, the head of youth football, have all met with Belletti, and seems like that's going to be the move to have him be in charge of Barça Atlétic next season. And so far, while he's been getting his coaching licenses, the young players seem to like him. They did win the UEFA Youth League under Belletti, so maybe he can use that same magical touch on Barça Atlétic next season to get them back to the 3rd division. And then our 5th piece of news, it's in the past now, but on Saturday, Barça Femení lost 1-0 to Arsenal women in the Champions League final for the women's game, and that was unfortunate because having watched Barça Femení so much over the previous seasons, this might have been their worst big game performance since they lost to Lyon 3 years ago. So it's really tough when you watch that game. It was hard to get through, honestly. Arsenal, they had their moments, but there was more Barca pressure, and Arsenal had a good game plan, so credit to them. They doubled CGH, who didn't really look healthy in this game, and Aitana had her moments, but even she couldn't really get to it. And Arsenal did have their moments in that first half. There was an own goal from Paredes that VAR checked, said no goal. It was pretty clear, actually, that it was no goal. But in the second half, it was Claudio Pino who was pushing, had gotten the start. She got a shot off the crossbar. There was another long shot. Aitana tried a back heel for the rebound. You had Onabatye not missing by much. It said, Barcelona, we're on the front foot. A lot of pressure and turning Arsenal over deep, but Arsenal just kept surviving. And then things kind of flipped in the 70th minute or so. Arsenal and Barcelona both making some subs. Blackstenius comes on for Arsenal, and in the 72nd minute, Mapi Lyon, on the rare occasion, misses out on a tackle. Catacol comes up with a huge save. So Catacol actually keeping Barcelona in it at that moment. Blackstenius was the one who made the immediate impact, and then 3 minutes later, she scores the goal. Meade's the one who feeds her. It's a nice little through ball as Barcelona let her free at the edge of the massive players after the corner kick was kept into Barcelona's half. And that's all she wrote. 1-0. Barça Femení could not score a goal. And that has been their Achilles heel. Every big match that Barça Femení have lost over the last few seasons is kind of by their own doing. If they don't take their chances, they wind up losing by the slimmest of margins. This is not a team that gets blown out. But yeah, this was a pretty rough one. And Pérez Romeu obviously is going to have a bad taste in his mouth. We'll see if the players generally, if they want to keep him around, because they could always try to bring somebody else in new. So for the Barça Femení this season, it's going to feel like a disappointment, even though they still wrap up their season in the Copa del Reina. So they could still win the domestic treble. And yet, because they didn't win the quadruple, it's going to feel like a bit of a letdown because they were the best team in women's football this season. The gaps are certainly closing, but yeah, it's their title to take until they give it away. But Arsenal took the title. I didn't think they were the better team, but that's the way football goes sometimes. So the Barça Femení, yeah, just really frustrating for them, as hard as they pushed and as much as this season they've had their issues, they've had their cracks, they still are the best team in world football, but they don't have the Champions League to show for that this season. That does mean some big decisions coming up for the Femení, likely in their offseason as they continue to push for more Champions Leagues in this dynastic run they're having. Meanwhile, La Masia is stuff to talk about, transfer stuff to talk about. Remember, please join me on Friday for that one on bigup.com/the Barcelona pod. You can become a member for free. That all helps me out, or subscribe on YouTube is the easiest way just to support the show and continue to help me make more shows like this. All right, well, that's it. I will see you now in a few short days. And until then, for Spartan.